Hey, it's James Ray Light. Yeah, I just wanted to speak on the Spike Lee movie KKKlansman, which I watched like a month or two ago, whatever it was, on demand on cable. And I'm a Spike Lee fan. I've been a Spike Lee fan since 1992, probably, something like that. I've seen most of his movies. I thought KKKlansman was a pretty good movie. But I think the problem, what I was seeing it as, was that people think that only one group of people are racist or prejudiced, which I think people who are African don't understand, that the world isn't based on prejudice, it's based on necessity. And I'm just speaking from my heart. I didn't memorize the script or anything like that. Necessity is the mother of invention, so prejudice wasn't necessary, neither was hatred. But for some reason, God invented it in the earth and in the universes. So everyone has a certain amount of degree of prejudice, even hatred, but not even if they don't hate people, they still might hate situations. Or they might hate bad food, they might hate being sick, they might hate being in jail, being in the hospital, being powerless, you know what I'm saying, being broke. Those are the things that people hate, but that have nothing to do with even ethnicity or groups of people. So people even, hate things that aren't even material things, just different kinds of food, if they don't like lettuce or they don't like, armadillos or something, animals, the ones that are roadkill. What I'm saying is anyone can hate anything or dislike anything. But what I'm saying is I think that everyone needs to focus on themselves and their own prejudice and their own hatred of something or lack of it, instead of trying to project a general idea that somehow the whole world is against Africans and that it's all a Zionistic white Jewish Nazi conspiracy against Africans, which it isn't. Because it's actually, the United States, has done more to save Africans than Africa has, I believe, in the last hundreds of years, including the Civil War, including all the scholarships, all the federal funded programs, all the housing that they've built. Africa actually sold Africans as slaves in the 1600s, I believe, to the Portuguese, who were not Europeans, who were Latin Americans. Even if they were the Portuguese in Spain, they were Europeans, I guess. But what I'm saying is, my relatives were European, Central European American. They were from Central Europe, from Poland and Germany and Czechoslovakia, or the Czech Republic. They didn't own slaves, and they had nothing to do with the redneck slave owners of the South or slavery or anything like that, as far as I know. Well, my parents came here 100 years ago or more from Germany, essentially. And they were just blue-collar people who educated themselves, went to college, and got normal jobs. My mother was a secretary, and my father, had white-collar business jobs, and then he was essentially ran a agency to help people get shelter and food, who were, minorities, actually, and people who were poor. So I'm just saying I like Spike Lee, and I like African people, and I like black people, and I'm just saying I think there's a general feeling that a fear that people don't talk enough about how they feel, and then it comes out in weird ways in movies where, what I'm saying is the irony of the film was that they were trying to show a white supremacy power structure. Even if it exists, what I'm saying is if you can't stop it, then you have to accept it. But it's your own prejudice that people have to work on. Because if you can't change a whole government structure that's based on whatever it's based on, I'm not going to define it because it's not my creation. But what I'm saying is people can only deal with their own prejudice and their own hatred. And trying to work towards their own tolerance of any situation or any person, is their own acceptance of it. That's the actual solution. It's not just blaming white people or Europeans. Like in that movie, they were trying to say that, the black guy was infiltrating the Ku Klux Klan, thinking that, or the white power structure, the police and the Ku Klux Klan and all the politicians, all the stuff. But I'm saying is the same thing exists in the African communities also. The same thing exists in Chinese communities, the same thing exists in Indian communities, the same thing exists globally, everywhere, I believe. Where there's a power structure set up, and it's not just all against Africans. Europeans spend more of their money paying taxes to help Africans, and to, just like We Are the World I bought in 1984, the Quincy Jones record. Just like I grew up with black friends and, had a black girlfriend in 1984. So what I'm saying is, it's people don't understand that my generation and the new generation is not prejudiced. Definitely not more than the older generation. They're definitely less prejudiced. So I think just people have to focus on the generalities of society, and if they just talk to people and they just look at people as human beings, everyone, without their ethnic divisions and their ethnic labels, I think it'll really help them out a lot. Because I think a lot of people are just afraid, and then they go to a group to protect them, and then the group propagandizes them, whether it's the Black Panthers or whether it's the Nazis or whoever it is, or the Republicans or the Southern rednecks or whoever, whatever power group they're involved in. And then they become part of that ideology. They lose their own mentality, so they actually get brainwashed. So the whole idea of black power should be self-power, just like white power is self-power. It should be. You're joining a group of people, but once you join the group of people, just like that, then you have groupthink mentality, just like in the Erykah Badu video. It's people join groups out of protection, out of necessity. They don't join groups out of hatred. Don't you understand? Because if everything is based on necessity, it's based on protection, of survival. It's not based on just hating people. So I think that the Klansmen, and I think the whole idea of trying to associate white people with a Klan is a 5% minority of people, not even, probably 2%. And Nazis are pro-German socialists, essentially from Europe, who don't just hate Africans, and they're not just trying, their mentality is not to destroy Africans. Their mentality is just a pro-German socialist mentality. I'm not a Nazi, but I'm saying I respect people's values, whatever they are, because I don't have to define my own values through them. So that's what I'm saying. And I think everyone needs to practice that, is defining their own values and seeing the world as it is, not seeing it as everything is racist or everything's a white conspiracy against Africans, because some of that structure exists in the CIA and all this stuff like that, structurally with laws that are Hebrew, not European, that are written by Jews. Which I think people need to understand that aren't written by German Nazis. They're written by Hebrews. Most lawyers are Jewish, which is from Israel, Palestine, and the Middle East. That's not necessarily from Europe, even if there are Jews from Europe, just like myself. My Jewish relatives, they sat shiv on each other. They weren't even lawyers. They weren't rich. Some of them were Hebrew from New York. Some of them were Irish Catholic from here, from the United States or whatever, or from Ireland. So they even split. So I think people don't understand human nature is more the issue than prejudice or hatred. It's not even ethnic. It's just people just don't like each other. And then if they get into large groups and then they say, we'll separate each other and we don't like you and then we don't like you, then there's going to be a conflict of interest. And then all that happens at all these riots and all these protests is that they're going to fight at some point. The black group or the white group or the police or the protesters. That's all that happens. That's all that's going to happen is a division and then, some kind of conflict. So I'm just asking people to resolve the hatred and the prejudice within themselves instead of taking sides. Instead of joining black power, white power, or joining, whatever group they want to join. But what I'm saying is they lose their individuality once they join that group, and they lose their own views, and then they become part of that group. Then those groups just get bigger. Then there's nobody thinking for themselves. So that's what I'm saying. I totally respect Spike Lee. He's a great filmmaker. His father was a jazz bass player. I'm a bass player. His father was a real Brooklyn jazz bass player. His mother was a teacher, English teacher, I believe. He's an educated man, and he's trying to teach people through film, and I totally respect everything he's done. But I just think that sometimes, just like on his rings, the love-hate rings, it is yin and yang like that. But what I'm saying is, that's just the universe. It's not a European world. You know what I'm saying? It's China and India are the largest continents, I believe, and Africa. So those aren't primarily white European Caucasian continents. This country is 50% white European, but China, India, and Africa aren't. I mean, there's some white people in South Africa, but they're the minority there. So that's what I'm saying is if you look in Latin America, it's not mostly Europeans, Caucasian white people. Because they want to say white, but there's no white country and there's no white continent. It's Europe, there's Britain, there's Ireland, the UK, Swedish, those Norway, Norwegian, all of those separate islands and separate countries, they're not white. None of them are called white. People aren't white. They're Caucasian Europeans or they're Caucasian. That's what they are. You know, white and black is not, there's no country called black. Africa is not a continent, it's not called black. There's no country called black, there's no country or continent called white. So I think people need to stop using those terms. You know, I'm just trying to tell people what I know, because this is what, I'm speaking from the heart. I didn't memorize some kind of, you know, script, and I'm not reading a teleprompter. So I'm just telling people, you know, I grew up with New York. I used to watch Taxi as a kid, you know, in 1978, the reruns and stuff on TV. You know, I've grown up with New York since Beach Street, since 1983, and learned black culture from the movies, and videos, rap videos and stuff, you know, and films like, you know, Colors, New Jack City, all that, you know, the inner city, you know, you see all the problems, all that stuff like that, you know. But it's like, you know, people have to move beyond that. They have to move beyond the struggle and move beyond the prejudice and move beyond the hate, because that's what they need to do, you know. So, just like I watched that United States movie, and I was moved by it, you know, I was sitting there in tears. It was a good documentary, you know, and people just need to accept the fact that, you know, people have to ask Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan and the other basketball players and the sports teams to rebuild, or the rapper community, whoever has the money, or the Jewish banks, whoever, the politicians, to actually donate to rebuild the skate parks, you know, in every major city, so Africans don't have to drive 3 hours to 6 hours or get on a plane just to go skating on Friday night, an adult night, you know, because that was the problem in that. And they rebuild, you know, one of them that reopened in Compton or LA, you know, which was cool. So, you know, I'm just saying is, you know, people, when they see a white face, they have to understand that Europeans were Christian, and they're basically missionaries. So unless they are 5% of the Nazis, or 5% of the Ku Klux Klan, or 5% of rednecks, which aren't, those were the only slave owners and the prejudiced people. 85 to 90% of European white Caucasian Americans are not prejudiced to that degree, where they join a power group and actually conspire against anyone who's African. Just like my father, they would usually do charity work to help people, you know, and all of our taxes pay for scholarships, grants, you know, financial, athletic scholarships, all this stuff. So I think people have to start seeing this world as it is, not as their projected racism of the past. They're trying to drag the slave past with them, but there's no reason to. Just like Hebrews dragging the Holocaust with them, it's over. You know, they've legally been free since, you know, since 1776, the Emancipation Proclamation, excuse me, from Lincoln, the Emancipation Proclamation, easy for me to say, but that freed people legally, at least by legal law, whether they're actually free in society or not. Probably not till 1900 or something, but what I'm saying is people still struggle, but everyone is a slave to someone. You know, they're a slave to their bodies, they're a slave to earth, they're a slave to their family, they're a slave to the schedule, they're a slave to time, they're a slave to the weather, they're a slave to the, you know, to the religion, they're a slave to their sports groups, they're a slave to their smartphone, they're a slave to their music, they're a slave to their culture, if that's what it becomes. So this whole idea of 440 years of slavery and oppression doesn't make sense, because Africa is the actual continent, is the actual people who enslaved their own people. And then they sold them to the Portuguese, who were Spanish. They weren't German. And they weren't white, and they weren't Hebrew Israels. So it doesn't make sense. I just think people don't know their own history enough. And I think people have to understand that white people don't walk around saying, you know, and doing racist stuff. If anything, they donate their money to stop people from dying in Africa and want to talk to black people, but people are just somehow not connecting because out of fear or because of just ignorance. And I think, you know, just like Spike's movies have helped educate people on both sides to see each other for how they are. But what I'm telling people, just like if you're from New York, it's like, you know, everything's not New York, Brooklyn, and the Bronx, and Harlem. You know what I'm saying? It's like Chicago's different, even if it's more violent or whatever. But what I'm saying is close. It's like New York, but it's smaller. But what I'm saying is, you know, every region is different. So I think people, if they see the world in their own perspective, they don't understand it that way. They're only seeing their own reflection of it. They're not seeing the whole cumulative view of it, which I think people really need to understand, you know, because that's what it really is, you know. So I just wanted to speak on that, and I just wanted to say I think people need tolerance of each other, and I think they need unity and acceptance of each other, and to date more and to actually get to know each other. Just like it was in the 80s, in the early 80s, like, hey, you can come over, we'll have, you know, soda and then sit in a swimming pool or something, just talk or whatever. You know, even it's like, you know, even white men and black women need to come together and date more. You know, it's not interracial, it's intercultural, but people are just human beings. But they've let all this nonsense with this ethnic stuff divide them, you know, and that's not good. You know, this whole country is called the United States, so it's supposed to unite people. you know, not just in practical law, and not finances, and not just in neighborhoods. People are going to divide in groups because that's their natural behavior pattern, you know. But it's like, you know, people will have their little niches or whatever. But what I'm saying is, or their quarters, but, you know, where they live in. But what I'm saying is people, you know, need to at least respect each other, tolerate each other, and unite to help each other more. That's all I'm saying. So I appreciate you watching the video, and thank you for watching it. And I do like Spike Lee, and that was a good film. But I'm just telling people, you know, to try to change themselves in the meantime, instead of just joining a group or taking a side or making a protest movie, is they have to get rid of their own prejudice, hatred, and try to actually talk to people in reality from different ethnic groups. And, you know, they don't have to change, it's up to them. But what I'm saying is they would benefit if they change the bad parts of themselves. Just, you know, just everyone's working on it. So that's what I'm saying. Human nature isn't going to be magically changed by a movie or by anything. But I'm saying if people accept it and they just try to change their own actions every day, that at least they can work towards it. You know, so that's what I think. It's better to work towards unity than division, always. And it's better to work towards acceptance in life than it is to live in non-acceptance. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. So I think unity, acceptance, and people, you know, dating each other and marrying each other more is actually the answer. You know, it's the European culture and the African culture coming together, which it has been for thousands of years in Europe and Africa, everywhere. So that's what I'm saying. You know, it's nothing new. So